and it'll probably be sent out sometime tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. Also attached to the recording, there will be a brief survey. We ask that you take the time, fill it out. It should take you no more than 2 minutes. Value your opinion as students and alumni here at WGU. So certainly looking for that feedback. So feel free to fill that out and then go back and reference anything that we end up chatting about during this session. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to have Brian introduce himself. Brian, if you'd like, share a little bit about you. What degree did you earn from WGU? What you're currently doing with your job title and your organization. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, it sounds great. Thank you, RJ. So my name is Brian Fleming, and I am the Economic Development Coordinator for Sherburne County, Minnesota. And I am a WGU grad myself. I graduated with through the MBA program, the Master of Business Administration, and then I went back and earned my Master of Science in Cybersecurity and Information Assurance. So can't speak highly enough of WGU and then the process. So I'm happy that all of you are here and hopefully can provide some value as to the different career paths that you might look to be able to get outside of your schooling with WGU.
And Brian, what kind of made you go back for that second degree? I always find it fascinating when somebody goes into a specific program and then does something a little bit different to go back and earn that second degree.
Yeah, I'd say probably two answers. One is that, after I did the MBA with WGU, it just kind of ended. I did my final class and then they would say, congratulations, you're done. And I say, oh, I'm just getting used to this. So I kind of started looking at what other programs on the master's side would pique my interest. And very much cybersecurity has been something that I've continually been interested in. I did some IT work in the Navy. And so it was nice to be able to use that as enough to get into that program. And the second reason is too, because I was in the Navy, I had the GI Bill. And great part about the GI Bill is if you have a single month remaining, that's enough to fund you for an entire semester with WGU. So I had that 1 month remaining. Technically, I had a little bit left, but I used that to be able to finish out the master's in cybersecurity within the 2 semesters. I did the MBA in 1 semester, and then I was able to do the cybersecurity in 2 semesters. So another great reason for WGU.
Awesome. What inspired you to pursue your current career? Is there a specific moment or experience, especially for the field that you're in? I don't know if we necessarily have, a set program like, hey, here's the path that you can get to this point. So could you just kind of go into how you ended up in economic development and what really was the background that made you pursue that specific career path?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm someone that's interesting as far as, having a cybersecurity degree, but yet economic development. And in case you don't know, and I didn't know before getting into this job what economic development is, usually any local city or county will have somebody like me that calls himself an economic development director or coordinator. But really, the goal is to look at the whole region and figure out how can you best support the businesses that are there? How can you help your workforce? How can you help attract in new businesses? So uh, it's an interest. I've taken a very interesting road, and WG's helped me with that because before this role, I was a code enforcement officer for the city of St. Cloud, Minnesota. And code enforcement is just what it sounds like, going out, being the person that says you can't have trash behind your house or picking up the stray dog. And while I was doing this for the city of St. Cloud, I was working through my MBA. I was working through cybersecurity. And at the time, I had the belief that if I got my cybersecurity degree, the floodgates would open up and I'd be able to land that perfect 100% virtual cybersecurity job, no questions asked. And that was really the goal. So, and same with the MBA. You finish that master's, and surely there will be jobs out there just waiting for you. And after I finished the MBA, it was pretty much crickets. I tried to send my resume out to a few places, but my resume said code enforcement officer, regardless of what my education said. And so I was in this weird position where, both with the MBA and cybersecurity, that was on my resume, but my day job was as a code enforcement officer. So it was really hard for a prospective employer to see how those two things squared with each other. So actually, what I did was, after graduating with the cybersecurity master's, I started up my own business, which is where the MBA came into play. So I started up just my own little cybersecurity firm. First, I called it Code Raisin, and then I updated that to Cyber Threat Intelligence Center, which sounds much cooler. And really, I just used that as my sandbox to play with cybersecurity tools and then educate others on cybersecurity tools. And then eventually help other people through my company do the same and build their resumes. So I worked with a lot of individuals that wanted to get into penetration testing, like everyone does in cybersecurity. And penetration testing is just one of those things that's the offensive cybersecurity side, where people want to see that on your resume. They want to see that you have multiple years experience in cybersecurity before you can even land really any sort of even entry level cybersecurity role. You need a few years experience. And so, I'm always a big fan of helping people through how do you build experience when you have no experience. One idea is to start up your own company and just help educate on tools, put out YouTube videos, put out instructional videos on how you can use these different off the shelf tools, get some free trials, get that going, and slowly you start to build up your experience. Now, how does that get us to economic development? Well, after having my own business for 2 years, I could then turn around, and once this economic development position opened up, I could make the strong argument that, hey, I've been a small business owner now for a few years, in addition to my day job, and I know how hard people are working with business, and I know how hard it is to be a business owner. So let me turn around and help others. Let me come with this MBA experience to say, yep, I understand some of the struggles you're going through as a business. Here's some workforce strategies. Here's some human resources strategies. Here's some cybersecurity resources. And that was the pitch that I made during the interview process. And I got lucky enough that they picked me up for it. And it's been really great ever since. So I really strongly advocate, whatever degree program you're in WGU, just when you graduate, you don't have to get a position that's specifically in that career path. You can be in a career path that's adjacent to that career, to that degree that you earned, because you can still use those tools in your thing. So like now I'm part of the technology steering committee. I'm working with our IT departments in the county. And I get to work with businesses throughout the day. So don't limit yourself to just saying, I have to get one job. Look at what some of the adjacent jobs are, for the program you're in.
And I love that, as far as don't put yourself in a box and think that, that's the only option that you have. Is if you do go for cybersecurity, that's it. You can only do cybersecurity moving forward in your career. And I love how you kind of took some of those different aspects and now are applying it to what you're currently doing. My next question, I guess, can you go in more detail as far as what do you do on a daily basis,
Sure.
with economic development?
It's definitely one of those positions where, no to, I'm glad someone knew about CTIC. Oh, hi, Elizabeth. I know her. Anyway, um, I would say for economic development, um, no 2 days are the same. So really what you're looking at is anything that can affect the economy, which the way we break that down is into 7 different focus areas, which I won't really dig into too deep, but that really does look like supporting the businesses you have in the area that you represent, supporting the employees there. So that looks like also looking at housing. Do we have enough housing for our employees? Is it affordable? Looking at childcare. Do we have enough childcare for our employees? Is that affordable? And And if not, for any of these questions, how do we then support? How do we then look at what grant opportunities and what loan opportunities come through from the state or from the federal government or from private agencies? And how can we blend that in and get more money and more resources into our community to help? And so economic development is really about networking and being the common term for economic development is being a dot connector. So understanding who does what, who's the specialist, so I can say I don't do that work, but I know who does, and continually doing these warm introductions between different agencies and people in your community, so that people feel connected. Um, and that goes back to my first master's degree is in Adlerian psychology in leadership. So from a different university, but psychology really is looking at connecting people. And so economic developers are connectors. We make sure that no one feels like you're an island and that you feel supported. So that's usually my 30-second pitch for economic development.
And how do you build those connections? Is there something specific that you usually do? Is it LinkedIn to build the network? Is it, getting out in the community and interacting with people face to face? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I'd say for that, my recommendation for everyone is to just lean on your own personal strengths. So for me, I'm an introvert, and it's so funny when I tell family members that I'm in this job because they're like, I don't see it. I don't see you going out and giving these big presentations. But that's not my strength. My strength is meeting people individually and just listening. I'm so curious about people, and if you bring a curiosity and you say, hey, I don't know what that business is, can you tell me about it? People love talking about their own business or where they're at in life, and then you can help them from there. So, going back to your question, it is a lot of one-on-one, very guerrilla style, just pounding the pavement. So finding new businesses, whether that be cold calling. So I've done some days I just will pick a region of our county and I'll just go into that business, and I usually have a flyer to hand them, a little bit about myself, and I'll do that cold calling. Sometimes it's working with the chambers of commerce, so being really involved with the chambers of commerce in your area. Sometimes it's going to the networking events like conferences and um, those types of things. And yes, to LinkedIn. I'd say that some communities are a lot more involved on LinkedIn. Cybersecurity community was very active on LinkedIn. Economic development, not so much. And so it's been interesting to take the very active component that I'm used to and I throw that into LinkedIn. And you're always shocked by how many people you meet and you shake their hand and say, oh, I saw your LinkedIn post. I know exactly who you are. So whether people comment on your LinkedIn or not, it's a good way to keep reinforcing that you're a professional in whatever realm you're in. So for economic development. So when you do meet new people, they may have already met you online and now they get to meet you in person.
Awesome. I do want to go back a little bit and kind of touch on just WGU. Where did you first hear about WGU? What made you pursue one of our degree programs, so the MBA and then cybersecurity, specifically from WGU? And then what have you utilized or leveraged the most since earning those degrees?
It's a good question on where I first learned about WGU. I'd have to really think on that. But one of the reasons why I searched for different schools is while I feel like I'm really good in school and I'm a pretty darn good learner when I want to be, I don't do so well in traditional school settings when I have to do group work or wait for other people. I like to have my own speed with things. So I had actually started MBA programs with two or three other universities and either withdrew or flunked out or I mean I if you looked at my transcripts, you're like, geez, this guy's terrible. But I knew for myself if I just found the right format. And the right format for me was I can go at my own speed. I don't have to wait for others. That kind of thing. So somehow, I think just through Googling schools that offered that type of thing, I stumbled upon WGU and I had always really wanted to push for my MBA. And so I started with WGU thinking that I might have struggles with it like everywhere else. But then immediately it was like, oh, I can already take the test for this course within 3 days because I'm ready for it. that's great. Let's go. And you pass that first test, and it's kind of like an adrenaline high. You're like, yeah, let's keep going. So that's definitely how I learned about WGU. I'd say the skills from WGU that I've really continued with is not only the subject matter that I learned both in the MBA program and the cybersecurity, but just that confidence of knowing if something's not working out, it's not maybe a reflection on me. It's a reflection that that situation or that style of learning isn't fitting my strengths, and I should work to maybe pivot, turn that Rubik's cube a little bit, and find a way for me to be successful. Because WG has proven to me that I can be successful if it lines up with my strengths, and then I'm off to the races. So it's given me a lot more confidence in life, knowing that I might be unique, but I can be darn successful when all the things line up nicely.
And I love hearing that, especially, hey, traditional school just didn't was wasn't a good fit for me. I think we hear that constantly with our students and alumni. So it's a good reminder that, hey, like, listen, like, this is unique, and pursuing a degree from WGU is a unique experience. So it is a helpful reminder, like, seeing where you are currently in your career, knowing that, hey, maybe more traditional school wasn't a great fit, but you were able to come across WGU, get 2 degrees in the process, and then have the career that you've had thus far. So that's fantastic to hear. As far as your current employment, like, what do you love most about your job? Is there something specific that you really enjoy, maybe that gets you excited about, going into work, or getting out and connecting with people? Is there something specific that you really
Yeah.
love about the job?
Yeah, I'd say that economic development is great for someone that comes to life with some curiosity. And for me, I'm endlessly curious about business and why people go through this terrible thing of starting a business. It's one of the hardest things we pull off as humans. On paper, most businesses wouldn't make any sense to start. It's one of the biggest gambles people take to start businesses, and but yet people do it, and then they're successful at it, and then they grow that business, and they allow other people to have jobs because their vision has taken off. And so to me, the best part of economic development is I get to go out and meet these people that either were once entrepreneurs or have worked their way up into a company. And because of their skill sets, because of their vision, their motivation to show up every day and do something well, they seeing their impact in the community. I love seeing that. So for me, if I'm ever having a rough day at work, or if I'm like, oh, this today's kind of boring, I'll just jump on the phone or go out and see if I can catch a business leader or a small business, and just have a conversation with them and say, hey, like, just tell me about your business some more. And people light up when they can talk about their own business and why they got into it. And again, just seeing how business as an entity creates jobs and it keeps our economy going. I think it's the engine underneath our economy that most people don't think about day to day if you're not interested in business, and that's okay. But without people's vision, without their determination, without them falling and getting back up and falling and getting back up, our society wouldn't be where it's at today. And whether you like capitalism or not, the way our structure is set up in this way, it really does incentivize folks that can take a beating and get back up, and again just keep rotating that Rubik's cube until they find that solution that works. And to me, it's so inspirational to meet folks like that in my local community, and really outside the community too. So I think that's my favorite part, is just sitting back and listening to how amazing people are, especially when it comes to business.
And that kind of ties into my next question too. Is there something that motivates you or keeps you engaged with work on a day-to-day basis?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
What keeps you motivated or engaged with work on a day-to-day basis?
I do think that being able to fill my schedule with meeting different people, both individuals that I haven't met before and individuals that I'm now establishing a relationship with, really keeps me going. Because, again, as an introvert, you would think that I would just want to sit behind a computer and not interact with each other, another person. But really, that's a misunderstanding about introverts. It doesn't mean that we don't want to see people and interact, but we really do thrive off of one-on-one interactions, having those deep, meaningful interactions with one person, two people, three people at a time, and building those relationships. So it's been nice. And what motivates me is in economic development, it is kind of a slow game. You're not going to see immediate changes in your community within a week. But I know that if I stick at this long enough, if I stay in the job for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, then you can go down the freeway. You can look at the cities and say, "Oh, I helped that business to grow. Maybe that business wouldn't have been there if we hadn't connected at that time and I hadn't connected them to this grant program that they didn't know about, or this nonprofit maybe wouldn't have been there." So you start to see your impact in the community in a very interesting way, and economic development is great because it is a world of yes and how. It's never a like, no, we can't do that. Like you won't ever really hear an economic development person say no. You'll hear them say, "That's a great idea. Let's figure out how to get there." And it's great to be part of that side of society that is very forward thinking and saying, "Yeah, that might be tricky to get there, but I see where you're going with that. And maybe if we pull together this person, maybe if we pull together this resource, we can slowly get there." And we do see that. We start to see changes in cities and counties that have robust economic development. You can see that impact almost right away within a year or a few years. So yeah, in answer to your question, it is just seeing that impact and knowing that you are on the positive side of the economy and kind of our society as a whole.
Is there anything that excites you of the future of the industry, or and maybe specifically it is within your county? Is there anything that really jumps out to you that you see coming up in the next year, maybe the next 5 years, 10 years?
There's definitely a few different ways of hitting that because my brain's already exploding with a few different things. But I'd say locally for Sherburne County, we're in a really excellent place for some new developments and initiatives and ways to help our citizens and our businesses. Really looking at the housing picture, looking at the childcare picture, and looking at entrepreneurship, and also how do we support the businesses that are in our area right now, and how do we help them grow? And we have some really great programs already existing, and some more coming down the pike in the future. It's definitely one of those that I can't get in the weeds on because we're still very much working through the process. But on the housing side, what are different ways we can support new housing to come in? How can we support the rehabilitation of the housing stock we have? How can we help people live where they want to live at the price they want to live, where they want to live for work? These are all really interesting questions to figure out. And the same questions apply to childcare. If somebody wants to work, do they have access to childcare that's affordable to them? And does the childcare provider get paid well enough to want to do that as their small business? So those are some interesting things. I'd say as a much larger scale, I'm excited for economic development in general, regardless of whether you're going through as a nation hard times or easy times or however you define that. There's always new problems to chew through and new Rubik's cubes to pick up and start playing with and figuring out what the solution is. So the work will never be done, but it is something that when you do feel tired, you can look back on the last year or 5 years and say, all these projects were done because we kept working at it. So let's keep working at this next problem because we'll see the improvements and all of that down the road.
I love it. Last question that I had before I allow the audience to jump in and ask questions. How might you recommend to somebody? Maybe it is a current student at WGU or maybe a recent graduate. How might that person get into economic development?
I really do appreciate this question because I like that economic development as a whole doesn't have one clear path to get into. As an economic developer, I don't hold a certification that took me 10 years to get, like somebody in the trades might have to work their way up to be a plumber or HVAC technology. Economic development, you are someone that can come to the table and be a dot connector between the businesses, between your citizens, between local and county government and the state and federal government. Someone that says yes to projects and keeps figuring them out. So really the way that I say folks could get into economic development is really there's two paths if you wanted to break it down. The first path is you could go to school for community planning or trying to think of some of the different majors. Definitely MBA is a good one to understand small business. You can get into urban planning. You can get into more like the planning and zoning side of the house. That's all great programs to do. And I've known some economic developers that go straight from going to school for that straight into economic development. The second path is more the path I took, which is maybe look at economic development as your third, fourth, or fifth career. Do something else. Do what you're going to school for. Maybe go into business in any capacity. Work for a business for a while. Work for a nonprofit. Do whatever you're going to do. And then later on, when you start to get bored with that, you can start angling yourself back into economic development. And then when you get that opportunity to land an interview for economic development, just sell yourself. And really, the way you sell yourself in economic development is look, I want to be a dot connector. I want to know what's going on in our communities. I am passionately curious at all times about all different subjects. I want to learn more. I want to appreciate people and where they come from. And that's a pretty hard argument to say no to, if you come to the table with that. I'd say in general, it requires at least a bachelor's pretty much in any subject, and then a master's in an MBA looks really good for it, or an MPA, which is a master's of public administration. Either one of those two are good. You can make the argument like I made that cybersecurity is a good one too. But really, it's just selling yourself, getting your foot in the door enough to land that interview and just use that interview as your selling point so that they're hard pressed to say no to you.
And I love that. It's just having an understanding of your skill set and being able to sell that to somebody during the interview process. I think that's fantastic. Um, what I'll do from here is I want to give people an opportunity to pick your brain, Brian, a little bit. So what I'll allow people to do if you want to post your questions into the chat, feel free to do that. If you would like to come off mute, I would just ask raise your hand. I can call on you and you can come off mute and ask your question, but I'll open up the floor to everybody to be able to do that. This is a reminder that the session is being recorded. It will be sent out. So if you want to go back and reference anything that Brian covered during those series of questions, you can certainly do so. But what I'll do is open up the floor for any questions that anybody might have. I'll give people a second to type those into the chat or raise your hand to come off mute. And as people are doing that, Brian, how long have you been in your current role?
Yeah, so only 5 months here. So
Okay.
I'll be going up for my 6 month evaluation within a few short weeks here. But it's one of those that 5 months feels like a long time because we've covered a lot of ground in five months. So I'm happy with that too. And I forgot if I mentioned, but I started my career path as a high school English teacher, so I'm definitely okay with pausing too to let people um, respond with questions. And it looks like we got a question in here.
Kristen, awesome insights, Brian. Thank you for sharing. How do you see emerging technology like AI changing things with economic development?
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great question to segue back into why I think almost everyone should get some sort of degree in cybersecurity or IT just to understand the massive impact AI will most likely have on everything. Uh, like all other industries, I'm hoping that we see AI help to streamline the research process and the data collection process so that way we can focus our time on solving the issues instead of focusing our time on the manual processes of typing out different documents. You know, we're already seeing the benefits and the downsides of AI in economic development. Just like any other field, we're seeing a lot more copy and just articles. Economic development's like anything else. If you put more articles out there online, you'll get more web traffic and maybe more people looking at your site. And so it's very easy to generate copy or informational articles through AI. The problem with that is just like any other industry, it's maybe good information, but it's kind of vague and it's not specific to your community. So that's not an area that I would push hard for AI in economic development. Where I would really focus is because you are dot connecting with so many different people and organizations, we can use AI to map out some of those ecosystems better. So even when we're looking at entrepreneurship, you can use AI to map out what program does what. So then you can go back into your AI program and ask if I've got an individual that's looking into health sciences and they have this amount of money and this is their business idea, who should they turn to first for their entrepreneurship journey? Based on the information that I've inputted, it should be able to help us out with mapping out some of their journey. And then me as the editor saying, yeah, that's right. This is a little bit wrong. That's right. And going on from there.
Awesome. I know AI, very hot topic across
Yeah.
industries, so I appreciate that. Next question that came in, what's one piece of career advice you wish you had received earlier on in your journey?
I think a piece of advice that I wish I had received is you don't have to figure everything out really ever. But you sure as heck don't need to figure out everything when you're just graduating high school or you've just earned your bachelor's. The road doesn't end there. And the other piece of advice I'd give to myself is you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one career. There's always a way to branch out and move into a different career path if you want it. I always struggled with careers that required me to sign a contract for a set amount of time. So I started my career path as a high school English teacher, and I taught in Nebraska, California, and Missouri. I really struggled with working under a contract. And so it's very ironic that then I went and joined the Navy, which was one of the most strict contracts you can ever be under. But um, unless you're under a contract, there's always room for you to move around and pivot into a different career and work your resume to prove why you have the hard skills and the soft skills to be able to move into a new career. So that's would be the advice is you're never fully stuck in a career. Just keep working that Rubik's cube.
And next question that came in, I appreciate the acknowledging that even once you get the degree, those job offers don't just flood in. How do you keep your hope up, stay resilient, especially as the market has cooled off now?
Yeah, and it's such a great question, and I'm so glad you asked it. And I don't think that there's I am definitely not a perfect example of always staying resilient. Sometimes you have those days where you're like, I sent in my 50th resume and cover letter, and I wrote this beautiful cover letter, and it's crickets, right? They don't even respond to you. You get nothing back, and it's like, oh, what a waste of time. I'd say though that in order to stay resilient, I would say that one, um, do try your best to maintain a day job that at least is covering the bills. I always get scared when working with job seekers where maybe they quit their job prematurely or are hoping to land the ideal job in their career field, like cybersecurity, and they're waiting for that. So then they're plunging deeper and deeper into financial debt because they're waiting for that one perfect job. That scares me, and then my recommendation for them is, or for anyone, find any job. If you don't have a job right now that isn't supporting the bills, find any job that will get you to the point of break even with your bills. Then take the time to really position yourself into the career path that you want. It's a lot harder and a lot more stress for you and your family if you're trying to find that ideal job when you can't keep the lights on. So really, that's my advice, and keep working on it. Yeah, yeah, we could that could be a whole hour topic too, but really, just keep finding ways of developing your resume so that every week your resume gets a little bit stronger, whether that's you doing your own business or freelance work or informational YouTube videos. So that way, in a month from now, when you do your next job application, you're even stronger as a candidate than you were 1 month ago.
I love that. And I think that's just something, it's a job search process. So it's not just a quick, easy thing. Very rarely do people get a job right off the bat. Like there is a process. It does take time. You are submitting a ton of applications, and it's a grueling process. So I appreciate you sharing that. It certainly is great insight there. I always tell people, it's a lot harder to find a job when you don't have a job. So making sure that you are currently employed, to your point, breaking even, and then pursuing things from there.
Yeah.
Next question: how limited are you by politics in working for a county government? How do you deal with decisions where popular opinion differs from known best practices?
Yeah, it's a good hard-hitting question. For the first question there, I would say that instead of looking at it as a limitation, I approach my job from a level of curiosity, and that helps. With any political discussion, if I come to the table and I sit there and I just listen to see what the opinions are that are at the table first before responding, that helps with anything that's charged one way or another. So I would argue that economic developers are not political by nature because our goal is for supporting our communities and for figuring out the paths that our communities need to best thrive. And I think if we focus on that, we'll be doing right by our citizens and we'll be doing right by our actual job titles too. So that might feel like I'm kind of dancing around the question, but it really is to say, how do we deal with being political in the position? You deal with it by doing your job well, by staying curious, by working, you're problem solving, you're helping people out with the resources that are available at the time. And then dealing with decisions that are where popular opinion differs from best known practices. Another great question. Uh, I would say that in economic development too, you often have to work on very large projects. And sometimes with very large projects, you have a segment of the community that is so against that idea. So whether it's a housing development, whether it's a redevelopment of downtown, whether it's a new childcare that's coming in and offsetting other jobs in the community. So you do have to strike that balance of popular opinion versus best known practices. And I think the best way you deal with popular opinion and the opinions people that rightly have is by having the town halls. You have the area where people can voice their opinions, and you give the respect of not interrupting and just seeing what the popular opinions are. Now, eventually, because the project is maybe full steam ahead, you might need to go with that project anyway. But hopefully, the individual felt like their opinions were heard, and if you can modify that project to fit that popular opinion within best known practices, then that's a nice win-win. And that's where we're always going toward. And sometimes it works better than others, but coming at it from a place of curiosity and seeing where those two actually do line up and agree more than disagree.
Next question that came in, how much is your work intersecting with workforce development efforts in your area?
Yeah, I'd say for workforce development, it is very much depends on the day. Some days a fair bit, and other days, we're off on other projects. But I'd say economic development is very focused on workforce development and what that could mean. Because I think under the workforce development umbrella, you could really spider that out into a broad variety of topics. But again, it goes back to if I'm meeting with a new business and that business is telling me that they're having a hard time finding employees because of X, Y, or Z, it's my job to figure out the dots to connect them on the workforce development side to find either new ways of putting out those jobs, new ways of enticing workers in, or vice versa. If we need to work on the development side, so actually working in the high schools, working with the local colleges, I work very closely with our with our high schools in the area, with the different teams that we have from DECA to robotics to ProStart, and knowing that they're the next wave of our workforce, making sure that we are supporting them all the way through the journey to landing in that company that I just met with yesterday that's saying they're having a hard time finding folks. So, yes, the work can very much intersect with workforce development.
Thank you. I'll give people another minute if they did have additional questions. Fantastic questions coming in.
I very much appreciate the questions too. They're really thought out here. In this time where we're waiting for more questions, I definitely, and we might get to it at the very end, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me. My picture is me. So pretty easy to find there. And anyone that's in the chat now or hears this later, I would love to know what you're going to school for at WG, or if you're considering it. Like I said, that curiosity piece. I really hate talking for a whole hour. Like, this isn't what I love. I would rather have known what everyone here that has been here, like, what are you doing in school? What problems are you finding? Are you looking for a job? Like, what are the struggles you're having with finding a job in your career path? So if you want to continue that conversation with me after this, be more than happy to through LinkedIn or wherever else.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brian, if you wanted to post your LinkedIn
Oh, sure.
in the chat, that would be awesome. So people know where to find you, and we can send that out in the follow up as well.
That's a good idea.
That would be fantastic. Another question has come in. Do you ever worry or guard against mission creep in your role? It sounds like you could work on so many different projects, solve so many different problems for your community.
That is probably one of the harder struggles in any economic development, especially when you're someone that's a one man band, or it's you and maybe one other person, or it's just you, which is my case. There's only one of me, and I would love to invest my time in all of the projects. And if I were in a different space, I would totally work 80 to 100 hours per week because I just want to keep chewing through all these problems, which isn't healthy either. So, how do you deal with all of that? I'd say that having a really strong strategic plan behind what you do helps you to narrow in on the projects that most matter. And so, fortunately for me, I came into an economic development authority, the EDA, that had a very clear strategic plan for me to follow. And that broke down the workforce development, business retention, expansion, childcare, housing, transportation. And so that already helps me to narrow my focus. And then at the end of the day, I do have to, ask my girlfriend, or I do have to ask somebody else, like, "Hey, is it okay for me to stop working here?" And usually they're like, "Yeah, take a break. You've already done a lot here." And so, yeah, I hope that answers the question. But really having a governing doctrine in the background that's like a strategic plan that says, "I would love to work on that project, but I really need to focus on my number one priority. And my number one priority is X, and that's what I'm working on today.
Did you make a portfolio of some kind, and do you feel some kind of portfolio or analysis reports would help get hired, especially in the absence of direct experience in economic development?
Yeah, yeah, love that. So I got lucky because for this economic development position, the first round was a typical interview. And I dealt with it like a typical interview. I did a ton of research ahead of time. So that way, when they led with the questions of like, so tell me about Sherburne County, I was able to answer a fair bit, which I think helped. So I'd say always, always, always do your research before the interview. Know as much about that company and the people that are interviewing you as possible, because you can work that into most of your answers and they'll appreciate that you did your time. And then after that, I moved on to the second round, which was a full presentation. And it wasn't a portfolio, but I got to give a full PowerPoint presentation on a specific subject in economic development. And I just worked my butt off for that and made sure that it really stood out. So to your point, absolutely make a portfolio, do something that stands out and proves to them that like you were the right person for the job and you were built for this job and you're excited for it. You want it. And I think that really comes through. So, and it can become a fine line between pushing hard and actually getting to the point where like you're calling too much. So find that fine line for you, but prove to them that you are so excited about this opportunity and that it's been an opportunity that you've been waiting for. And despite all the other candidates that actually have more experience than you do, your passion for this and your excitement for it is what they want because they know you're going to be working your butt off once you get the position.
Next question that came in, when you were setting up businesses, did you get more engagement on video content or written content?
That's a great question. And I think Elizabeth knows the CTIC days through LinkedIn. And I'd say it very much depends on your content. I would say that consistent written content, especially content that you can comment back to, which is why LinkedIn comes in handy. When you can have that active discourse between you and your audience, that's the best because then you can start to grow those relationships and then you start to grow an active following. Same goes for video content. I would always suggest video content where you can post it, but then have those conversations. If you try to fire and forget, like put a written thing out there or a visual thing, and you don't do any follow up for it yourself, no one's gonna care. It's crickets. It's a big vacuum out there, and it's like throwing a rock at the moon. Like no one cares. But if you follow it up and you start to build those relationships, it doesn't really matter if it's written or visual. It's those relationships that starts to become that groundswell. I for the cybersecurity side, I always looked at it like I was in a cave, and if I could get my echoes, and I was just shouting in the cave, but if I could get some more people to shout in the cave with me, and eventually we got enough sound going, that sound would start to echo outside the cave, and other people would start to care, and you get more and more people that way. It's a weird analogy, but it's just the idea of working with the audience you have and just keep building those relationships. Mhm.
I love it. All right, Brian, any closing remarks to those that attended or uh, those that might go back and watch the recording? Any final remarks on your end that you might want to share with the WGU community?
Just that, just to own the strengths that you have. As you can tell, even just from this video, like I'm not the best looking guy. I'm not even the most eloquent speaking guy, but when your employer can see that you're passionate about something and that you're like living through the strengths that you do have, you're kind of a force to be reckoned with, and it's hard to stop you. So do spend some time thinking about yourself, and instead of dwelling on the areas that you struggle with, just drive through your strengths. Myself, I have a hard time remembering people's names. And that could be a huge problem in economic development when I'm supposedly the dot connector. But you learn the workarounds for yourself. You learn people's names through all the written content. You learn that it's the relationships that matter. So people will forgive you if you don't remember their first name right away. But it's like, oh yeah, we worked on that project together. Let's keep going on this new project. So it's really easy for us to just stay in our weaknesses here, but that doesn't really get you anywhere. So pretend that you are confident in your strengths and see what that leads to for you. And hopefully that leads you down the right path.
Awesome. Brian, I just wanted to start off. Thank you so much for jumping in and providing some great insight as far as what you're doing in your career, and I think that this is an opportunity for you to kind of highlight that, and hopefully somebody took takes some key points away from here, especially that job search process. Like I think that's instrumental. Take something away here and apply it to their career, whether they are getting into economic development or maybe it's something completely different. But your points as far as not necessarily putting yourself in that box and only pursuing those specific degree paths or career paths from those degrees. I think that's instrumental, and it applies to so many people here at WGU. So I just wanted to say thank you for your time jumping in and sharing these insights. This was fantastic.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity. And again, happy to keep connecting with people when this is all said and done too.
Awesome. Just a reminder to everybody, session was recorded and that will be sent out probably tomorrow morning. So keep an eye on that. Also attached is a survey. It should take you no more than 2 minutes to fill that out. So please take the time to do that. But Brian, thank you again. We certainly appreciate it. And we'll make sure to send people your way to build that professional network and connect with people if they do have additional questions.
Yep, that sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your Monday. Take care.
Thank you.